and welcome to my YouTube channel, Nerd Girl Power. So I know I've been saying I've been trying to do this more regularly lately. Wanted to do it last week, didn't happen, but I am on this week. And hopefully this will become a weekly thing. That is my ultimate goal, is to make this a weekly thing so you get your weekly nerdy updates on, well, whatever I feel like, I guess. So, hello everybody. I hope everybody is doing good. And that you're not too hot. You need to check on your friends here in the deep south, because we're just sweating just a little bit because it's a bit toasty here. So, ironically, this week, with it being hot, I thought, what better thing to talk about than Joe Hill's book and story, Nosferatu, which is something that's actually having to do with Christmas, and it is set in winter. So maybe that'll cool us all down a little bit. So that is my topic of discussion this week, Nosferatu. It's written by Joe Hill. And for anybody who doesn't know, Joe Hill is the son of Stephen King. If you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you. It's glaringly obvious, at least when you look at pictures of the two. And he is a writer. He's written, I believe, 4 novels. We have Heart-Shaped Box, Nosferatu, Horns, and the Fireman. And there's also 2 collections of short stories. One of them is 20th Century Ghosts. The other collection is Strange Weather. And there are also a few graphic novels and a couple of collaborations with Dad. One of them is called In the Tall Grass. The graphic novels are Lock and Key. I have read all of his novels. I have also read the collection of short stories, 20th Century Ghosts. I have not read Strange Weather yet. That has actually been downloaded to my Kindle. It's waiting for me to read it, so eventually I'll get to it. I have not read Lock and Key. I do have that as an audiobook on my tablet. Still haven't gotten to that yet. And I have not read In the Tall Grass yet, and I keep meaning to. Haven't yet because I heard that's really gruesome and disgusting, so it sounds like it's right up my alley. But out of all the things that Hill's written, I think Nosferatu is my favorite. One of the reasons is because it's a horror story, and it's actually you feel like you're reading a Stephen King book. And I try not to compare the two because it's not fair to either one of them. But I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I like Nosferatu so much, is because it has a feel of a Stephen King story, especially an old school Stephen King story. So it's my favorite. And you can imagine my excitement when I found out that AMC had the rights to it and was adapting it to be a TV series, which will premiere on AMC on June 2nd, which is this coming Sunday. So, and I've seen the trailer. It looks amazing. Offhand, Zachary Quinto, I know, is in it. He's playing the main villain of the series, Charlie Manx. I'm not sure off the top of my head who else is in it, but it looks to be amazing, and I think it'll be fantastic, so I can't wait to see it, and I think AMC will do it justice. But today I'm here to talk about the novel, the source material for that miniseries. So, from this point forward, if you have not read the book, there will be spoilers. I want to get that out of the way. I will be spoiling probably like everything in this story, a Nosferatu. So again, be warned. Sum up the plot to Nosferatu. Nosferatu centers around its main character, Vic McQueen, or Victoria McQueen. Her nickname is, excuse me, the Brat, for reasons this is important. We'll get into that in a little bit here. We follow Vic from very young adulthood, as in pre-middle school, all the way to Vic being in her 30s in around 2012, 2013. And Vic is a gifted artist, and she also has a bike that she loves to ride. And somehow Vic discovers that if she wants to locate a lost object, she can think about that lost object and ride her bike, and then she can teleport herself to where the lost object is and locate it. And this comes in handy for Vic, but it also causes her some issues because she keeps finding these lost objects and has to come up with a non-supernatural explanation for how she found it. Plus, the teleportation also takes its physical toll on Victoria. And Victoria grows up in a home that can be described as somewhat of a broken home. Her parents wind up divorcing. She feels that her father abandons her. So she gets into trouble as a teenager. And part of that trouble is she crosses paths with an old man named Charlie Manx. And Charlie Manx also has a vehicle that he can take to some place that he calls Christmas Land that you can't find on any map, and it's not part of our world or any world that we know. Charlie kidnaps children, and I don't know how to put this, but he eats their souls so that he can maintain his eternal youth and not age. And once the children are drained of their souls, they become monsters with unnatural teeth and so forth, and basically become his little minions. In other words, Charlie Manx is a type of vampire that preys on children specifically. He preys on their youth and innocence. Well, he and Vic cross paths. Charlie attempts to kidnap Vic, but it's not successful. Vic is able to escape, and Charlie Manx is arrested and assumed to be in a coma and placed into a hospital. And this happens back in the 90s when Vic is a late teenager, so she grows up to be an adult. She has a child, moves in with the father of the child. They never get married. And the man that she has a child with, his name is Lou Carmody. They named their son Bruce Wayne Carmody. Yeah. And but he goes by Wayne. And Vic is also a troubled adult because of her experience with Charlie Manx. She's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and convinces herself that her abilities are something that she hallucinated as a child and dreamed up. Well, Charlie Manx eventually wakes up and he escapes with help from his Renfield, or a man named Bing, who's another level of creepy that we'll talk about in a little bit here. And Bing and Charlie go after Vic and her son Wayne. Wayne is kidnapped by Charlie, and Vic races against time to save Wayne from Charlie. And Vic ends up destroying this Christmas Land place and rescuing her son Wayne, but a price is paid at Vic's life as she dies saving her son. Wayne goes on to live with his father Lou, and we discovered that Wayne's soul is part of it's still trapped with Charlie, but his father finds a Christmas ornament that has that part of Wayne's soul in it. They destroy the ornament, and Wayne becomes the normal child he was before, and presumably goes on to lead a normal life. And like I said, I love this book. And Nosferatu is just, it's my favorite Joe Hill, but really it's one of my favorite books, period. And there's just so much to love about it. And I'm not sure where to start. So let's start with the protagonist, Vic McQueen. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Joe Hill, he's as good as his dad in a lot of things, and I think that in some things he's better. And writing a good female protagonist, I think that he may have Dad beat in that, because Vic is a wonderful character. She is tough. She's badass. She wants in on the action. She's not going to wait to try to destroy Manx and save her son. She wants to do it herself. And she's also a relatable character in that she has issues with mental illness and addiction due to her experience being kidnapped as a child. And I think that's, a great metaphor, because we look at people being rescued from their kidnappers. We think it's happily ever after, but I'm sure it's not. I'm sure that suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and addiction and so forth are probably, that's more common than we realize. So having Vic drawn out this way, I really liked it, because there's not a lot of, books or TV shows that look at mental illness in such an honest light, and I really appreciate Joe Hill for doing this, and it's one of my favorite parts of the book, because again, Vic is not perfect. She's got substance abuse problems. She worries constantly that she's not a good enough mother to Wayne. So she's just somebody that everybody, I think, can relate to. I also like the fact that she's an artist. I think that's really cool. I might be biased here because, some of you may know that I'm an artist too, and I love to draw and paint and so forth. So having a character, a protagonist, that's what she does, I really like that. She writes children's books when she's an adult, and she also illustrates them, and they're kind of like these visual illusions, and I thought that was really neat. And she takes her pain that she suffered as a child and writes slightly disturbing children's books, and I thought that was really cool. So Vic is one reason to love Nosferatu. Now, Charles Manx, we love to hate him because he's a fantastic villain. And again, Charles Manx is the Dracula of this story. He is a vampire. He doesn't suck blood, but he has a vehicle that takes souls of children that give him eternal youth, so he is a vampire. And on my list of vampires, he's pretty high up there. Kurt Barlow from Salem's Lot's always going to be OG for me, along with Dracula. And of course, David from Lost Boys, and then my boo Spike from Buffy. But yeah, as far as vampires go, Manx ranks up there, or is it down there? And he's a great villain. He also even has a Renfield, or his assistant, that does all his dirty work. And that's the guy named Bing that helps him kidnap children for the premise that he'll get to go to Christmas Land and have some kind of eternal reward, I guess. I'm not sure what the logic is, but it's even mentioned in there that Manx has always had his Renfields. Oh, by the way, guys, if you hear any noises, I've got my furry co-hosts here in the form of my 3 dogs. Since it is too hot for them to go outside, they protested, so they are hanging out here with me. So if you hear anything or see a nose in a camera, that would be one of them. So, excuse me for that. But again, back to Nosferatu. We have a great villain. There's also the concept of Christmas Land, a place where it's always Christmas. It reminds me of that Donald Duck cartoon that I saw as a kid, where Donald's nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, wish that it was Christmas every day. and they get their wish, and for a while it's great, but then they just kind of start to get fed up with it because it's not special. And that's what Christmas Land is just, it's creepy. I mean, I like Christmas, I guess, as much as the next person, but to live in a place where it's always Christmas and there's giant snowmen and giant Christmas trees, that's just, to me, would be really creepy. And there's just something inherently creepy about hearing Christmas music. I live in the South where it's warm for a good part of the year, so it just always kind of freaks me out to hear Christmas music when I might still be in shorts and a t-shirt. So, yeah, there's just something about that. And I think with his descriptions of Christmas Land, Joe Hill hit it out of the ball. Okay, so we talked about Christmas Land, and mental illness and vampires, but I think this book also has a lot to say about the creative process, and I really enjoyed that because the premises, as from stated by Maggie, one of the side characters, a librarian that helps Vic in her quest to destroy Christmas Land, is that the creative process, we live in the real world, and then we also live in the world in our heads. And some people are able to take a knife and go into the world in our heads, and she calls it an inscape, which I thought that was a really cool term. And if you think about it, I mean, you hear musicians hear music in their head and they write a song, and we hear that song on the radio or we hear it played. A writer, like Joe Hill or Stephen King or George R.R. Martin, they think of a world in their head, they put that world onto paper, and we end up reading that book, and if they do a good job, we feel like we're a part of that world, we get to know these characters, we feel an attachment to these characters, and if something happens to these characters, we feel it. So, it's like you have the real world and you have the world in your head, but sometimes how separate are the two? And that's what this book plays around with, and I really like that. And this book has a lot of good quotes. Let me read a couple for you. Okay, here's one. She breathed deeply of the scent of decaying fiction, disintegrating history, and forgotten verse, and she observed for the first time that a room full of books smelled like a dessert, a sweet snack made of figs, vanilla, glue, and cleverness. Oh yeah, that's how I used to feel at the library when I was a kid, so that was cool. And fantasy was always only a reality waiting to be switched on, which is kind of what I was just talking about, how we have the real world and the world inside our heads, but again, how separate are they really? Okay, here, this one. The blood of a red-headed woman is 3 degrees cooler than the blood of a normal woman. This has been established by medical studies. And I remember that Manx says this, and I feel slightly attacked here as a redhead. Although I can't really disagree with it now, can I? But anyway. Okay, and here's a quote from Maggie. She's that librarian with the speech impediment that I was talking about earlier. She's one of my favorite characters in this book. Everyone lives in 2 worlds, Maggie said, speaking in an absent-minded sort of way while she studied her letters. There's the real world with all its annoying facts and rules. In the real world, there are things that are true and things that aren't. Mostly the real world sucks. But everyone also lives in the world inside their own head. An inscape, a world of thought. In a world made of thought, in an inscape, every idea is a fact. Emotions are as real as gravity. Dreams are as powerful as history. Creative people, like writers and Henry Rollins, spend a lot of time hanging out in their thought world. Strong creatives, though, can use a knife to cut the stitches between the 2 worlds, can bring them together. Your bike my tiles, those are our knives. And let's talk about Maggie here for a minute. She's a librarian, and she lives across the country from Vic in the Midwest. Vic lives in on the East Coast. And Maggie has Scrabble tiles. She was a champion Scrabble player, in fact, at one point. And these Scrabble tiles allow her to see events that are happening, but she can only see them in proper nouns per the rules of Scrabble. So she sees her tiles spell out the words "the brat" one day, which of course the brat is Vic, because her father's nickname for Vic is the brat. So Vic is able to cut through reality with her bike and meet up with Maggie when she is a child. And of course they discuss Manx, and Maggie tells Vic that she could probably stop Manx, although at the time she's too young and so forth. And the two, of course, meet up later when Vic is trying to rescue her son, and Maggie tragically loses her life to Manx. But she was one fascinating character, and there's rules that Hill has established for these type of abilities. And it is that they come at a cost. And Maggie has a stutter. Vic has like mini aneurysms or strokes. And Manx loses his empathy and becomes more of a monster due to his abilities. And I really like how detailed Joe Hill goes with the rules for this type of ability. Because if you're going to have fantasy, it needs to have rules that it follows, and you need to be consistent. And he does a really good job with this, and it makes it, that much more believable. Even though we're reading about people that can teleport and do other unnatural things, there's rules for them, and it comes at a cost. Which to me, it's logical, because if you're doing something unnatural that your body's not supposed to do, I don't think your body is going to like it. So there's going to be a price to pay somewhere. And I really like that aspect of the story. And I thought that Joe Hill did a good job with this. And let's go with another quote. Hold on just a minute. People made the imaginary real all the time, taking the music they heard in their head and recording it, seeing a house in their imagination and building it. Fantasy was always a reality waiting to be switched on. So yeah, it again goes with the theme of the book about the bridge between the real world and the world in our heads, and again, how separate are they really? And they're really not all that separate. And I thought that quote summed it up. So, well, I'm about out of time for today, guys. But if you haven't read the book, go check it out. It's N0S4A2 by Joe Hill. The audiobook is narrated by Kate Mulgrew, aka Captain Janeway from Star Trek Voyager. And I have listened to both the audiobook and I've read the book. Mulgrew does a fantastic job narrating it. I mean, if you listen to this book while you're in the house alone, all of a sudden you won't feel alone anymore. That's how good she is. And she's just able to capture the emotion and the creepiness and horror so well. I highly recommend it. It's one of the best audiobooks I've ever heard. But I will be signing off for today. Again, I hope to be back on this on a regular basis. Going to try to make it a weekly thing. But I am saying goodbye for today. And as always, may your days be long upon the earth.